What's up, gang? Welcome to The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde. And boy, do we have a special guest. My man, Brian Evergreen, is in the house. What's up, Brian?
I'm doing well. How are you, Darius?
I'm doing fantastic. It's Friday afternoon. We're here doing some podcasting. I'm getting ready to go to Belize next week. I cannot complain.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Have you been in Belize before?
I have not been to Belize before.
Yeah, we have something in common. Neither have I, but I'm about to go. So
why are you going? What's taking you there?
I'm going for spring break. Coming up. My wife and I. Actually, I will tell you in a second. I'm going to intro the show, and I'm going to tell you exactly.
Okay.
It's a funny story, and it's me giving a nice big fuck you to the airlines. So
okay,
that's what it is. You got to hear it. You got to hear it. But I want to honor you on the show. But before we go there, we're gonna honor our audience, and then we'll get going, and I'll tell you all about how I'm FUing the airlines. So, do you mind if I do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get going on that?
Not at all.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Cool. So, for listeners who are new to the show, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things: people are living their passions and those creating greatness in the world, and doing so despite the odds. And my man Brian here is neither short of passion nor greatness. Brian came to us through his PR for his book, 40A. I've talked about them before. They we get a lot of their authors that have great books, and they're always these amazing thought leaders. But I was telling Brian before the show, I'm like, probably for every, 20, 25 people they send our way, we'll get one of them, we'll make it on the air. And I saw his book and the work he's doing in AI and in the autonomous world. And I was like, oh man, I want to talk to this dude. And so, man, pumped to have you on the show, pumped to talk about all the cool stuff you're working on. And yeah, man, a lot of gratitude to have you here today. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah. So you want to talk about Belize, or you want to talk, or should we do your bio? I'll give you the.
Let's do Belize. Yeah, whatever you think.
Dealer's choice. No. You're the guest, man. I'm just throwing. So, okay. Do you got kids by chance?
I do. Yep. A 3 and a 5-year-old.
Okay. And what part of the world are you coming from?
I'm coming from the Pacific Northwest. I live just outside of Seattle.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. So I grew up in California, and maybe I just didn't notice, but the airlines, what they'll do is, they're just, it's so shady. What I would say, what they do is they look and they literally jack up ticket prices of wherever the whatever spring break is in your school district, they jack up the freaking airline prices.
Yeah.
Which is completely fucked up, right? So I'm like, hey, I want to take my kids to go see my mom in California, where I grew up in Southern California. And it's like $1,000 to go from Austin for coach. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go to Cancun, 2-hour flight away, $1,200. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? This is insanity. Everywhere I wanted to go was like stupid. It was like cheaper to go to Europe, right, than a 2-hour flight to Cancun. And I was like, it was like anger, then denial, and then
you
acceptance.
Went through the stages.
Yeah, I went through the stages: anger, denial, acceptance. Except when I got to acceptance, I was like, "Fuck them," and I was like, "I'm gonna take my kids out."
Sound like acceptance.
No. It was acceptance. It was Darius's version of this: anger, denial, revenge. I was like, you know what? Who are they to say that my kids have to stay in school next week? So I pulled my kids out of school like half a week early. And I was like, my kids' spring break starting Wednesday, not Friday. And so I literally was like, if I leave early, like they missed last 3 days of school, like ticket prices were half as much. So my kids' spring break starts Wednesday morning, not Friday afternoon. And I come home Tuesday. So I was like, dude, I can go to Belize for like $400. It was $400 each. If I left on Saturday, it was $1,000, or Friday afternoon, it was $1,000. Just by leaving 3 days early, it was literally like $500 per person. So anyone out there, my listeners, my loyal listeners, I love you. I just told you what to do. Screw the man. Take your kids out of school early. And you want to hear my rationale for this, Brian?
Of course. I mean, how am I supposed to say no to that?
Outside of financial, I was like, dude, I don't remember like ever. There's not, you could not convince me of 1 minute I spent in my 8th grade or 4th grade class, which they're going to forever hate me for. Yeah. There's none. Like, I don't even remember what I learned in those classes, let alone what I was doing. And I'm like, nor are they going to remember. Now, my older son, who's 8th grade, is like pissed off at me because he's missing some finals and stuff. And I was like, oh, just go. I'm such an entrepreneur. I'm like, just go tell your teacher she'll take it later early. So
yeah, exactly.
If the teachers are listening, they're like, your dad's an asshole. Anyway, so I just gave you a cheat sheet. Wait, how old did you say your kids were again?
3 and 5. So we're at the very beginning. We just started preschool this year.
Oh yeah, so preschool's great because you can just like, there is no schedule. You're like, it's like nap time and crackers, you know. But hey, when they get to the point where like you kind of get to a point around junior high where it's kind of hard to like rip them out of school, because I've been abusing this, by the way, like the school thing for like, I don't know, my kid's 14, 13 years, where I'm like, whatever, just rip him out. My wife's like, he's gonna miss school. I'm like, who cares? So here we are. Anyway, that was my Belize story. So I'm going to Belize.
It's a great story. I hope you have a great time.
I hope so too, man. We're gonna go like canoe in the rivers and go look at jaguars. I mean, that and then some. Do you mind if I do your formal bio now that I've eaten up 5 minutes of like how to smack the man in the face? All right. So, you guys, I really was super interested in bringing Brian in on the show because of the work he's doing regarding the autonomous transformation. So Brian's authored the book, Autonomous Transformation, Creating a More Human Future in the Era of AI, published by Wiley in 2023. We love Wiley. They're a great publisher. I mean, this is a Thinkers 50 breakthrough. We're talking all the good stuff, the big thought leader stuff. Brian's checking all those boxes. You got experience at Accenture, AWS, Microsoft. I said Bain before the show, but I realized I was misreading his name, which is Brian. So Brian also advises for a lot of global organizations. Guest lecturer at Purdue University and the Kellogg School of Management, and founder of the Future Solving Company. So this man is doing some really cool stuff in the world. Did I hit all the high notes? Did I miss anything?
I mean, I think you got most of them. They're all the important ones anyway.
Nice.
I also advise, I'm a senior fellow for the conference board is the other kind of main thing I do, which is more in the research and an extension of, advising C-level executives or VPs or organizations that are, trying to harness the potential of technology.
Very, very cool. So look, here at the Greatness Machine, we love origin stories. I'm a context guy. We love to hear the background. You didn't just wake up one morning and have a book that you written in your hand and changing the world through AI and autonomy. Tell us how you got to where you got to. We'd love to hear some of the origin story from your life.
Okay, so I always joke that I have the most linear path you can imagine into AI, and you can tell just from the setup that that's not going to be the case. So I started out as an internationally competitive chess player. So I used to represent the U.S. versus other countries.
No way.
My claim to fame in that world is that I played Josh Waitzkin. If you ever saw Searching for Bobby Fischer in the 90s, I played against the boy that the movie was about. In a real tournament setting. So. And then I had to retire at 12 because it was either like go be homeschooled and study chess full time, or get to keep going to school and do sports and be around all the other kids and everything. So I chose the latter. I wanted to be at school, and then I fast forward to college. I was studying music theory and composition, but gaining some business experience because I was building a company with my brother teaching kids chess, and so I think distilling like the complex into something simple is like a skill that I was sort of just accidentally building along the way. And then I think that from a music side, thinking about systems and thinking about like coming together with people from all over the world where maybe you don't even speak the same language in terms of like speech, but hey, we share the same language of music and we're going to do something beautiful together. Right. And so then fast forward a couple more years after graduating, we're in about 400 schools around the U.S. Teaching kids chess, and then I decided to pivot and joined Accenture and Accenture Strategy. And my first client ever was Microsoft, and the rest is sort of history. I dove deep into analytics and software engineering, and tried to kind of ride the balance from that point on of strategy, analytics, and software engineering, which kind of come together, I think, in a good way when it comes to AI. And fast forward a few more years, I'd done some boutique consulting after leaving Accenture, and then I joined Microsoft as a U.S. AI strategy lead, which meant flying out to Fortune 500 C-level executives and talking about how their organization or their industry was going to be transformed by AI. This is before the generative AI wave, right? And then my most recent position I held was I was the global head of autonomous AI co-innovation. So still meeting with those executive teams, talk about transforming with autonomous AI. And I really felt like there was this era of transformation coming beyond digital transformation. I think often we refer to digital transformation as the end. And to me, it's just the opening. And so the next era that I see is autonomous transformation. So I decided to take what I was seeing and what I was hearing and go research and dive deep into that to say, okay, what are the actual themes and what are the actual frameworks and methodologies that we can use to practically approach these things? And so that's what led me to the writing of my book. And since the book launched, I've been going out and sort of doing the things you're supposed to do when you launch a book, of talking to people like you and giving keynotes and doing workshops and advising.
So let me ask you a question. So I want to take a step back to your chess days. By the way, I tried hiring Josh to be a coach for me. He does like super high level coaching right now, I applied. He ghosted me. He didn't respond. So I was like, what's up with that, man? Yeah, I'm not cool enough. So it's all right. That's all right. You don't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Well, he beat me at chess. So, he ghosted you and he beat me. So, he's
yeah, we should like egg his house. No. Hey, Josh. Brian and Darius have something for you and your family. Eggs. No, I'm messing. I would toilet paper his house. So let me ask you a question. I watched, I love that movie, by the way, the Search for Bobby Fischer, but I just watched with my son, The Queen's Gambit. Did you watch that movie or that show? Of
course. Yeah, I had to.
I would assume so. So how like, first of all, I don't think it's a true story. I think it's a made up story, right?
Totally made up. Yep.
But is there how much, like, having been in the world of chess, how much of that was just drama? How much of that was like, oh, it's kind of like that?
So it was actually, I was pretty impressed. The degree of detail that they went to and how much they must have consulted with actual chess players so that the conversations would sound like they were actually talking about real chess games was very impressive to me. So that piece of it, I would say like 9 out of 10. There was really one moment that really sort of broke the fourth wall for me, which was, or broke the magic, which was when the one of the main characters says to the main character, the woman, he says to her, hey, do you want to play? They're in the middle of a tournament context and they're taking a break. And he says, hey, do you want to play speed chess, bug house, blitz, or Skittles or something like that? And it's like, well, speed chess and blitz are the same thing. And then Skittles is anything you do in the midst of a tournament where you're continuing to play. They call that Skittles. So it's like, it already would be Skittles if you were doing any of those other things. And then, and so there was just this little break for anyone that was in the chess world probably was like, oh, that's not quite. But the fact that there was that one moment that I noticed throughout the entire season, I would say is like really, really good. And then the other main difference I would say is that when if you were to go to like an adult chess tournament, people do not look as well dressed or as the situation is less illustrious as what you saw in the movie, which makes sense because it was a Netflix special. So yeah, I
love that. So I have a question for you regarding like gaming in general, especially since you were like in that world at a young age. So I started playing. Both my kids like to play them, but my younger son is like kind of a maniac when it comes to board games, and so I started teaching him Risk. Have you ever played Risk before?
I have, yes.
Yeah, so it's a strategy game, right? What are your thoughts as you start to think of like how you came up? Obviously, you have an interesting background, both technical and musical. So there's a left brain, right brain type
Totally.
of thing going on there. I just learned my first musical instrument about 3 years ago, which is the ukulele.
Nice.
And
Okay.
and it's pretty like interesting if you've never played an instrument before to like start to learn how to play music, because it's you cannot play music. What I found at least is you cannot think about other stuff while you're playing music. Like at least I can't, because I'm like you got to be focused on the instrument. So you're fully present, which is so it's a nice escape from like life, because you're like have to be present with the music, especially if you're not good, right? Which I'm not.
When your muscle memory gets there, you can, but yeah, totally. It still pulls you in for sure.
Totally. So when you start thinking about like technically, you ended up in this very technical world, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But having come from the world of strategy and game, like how do you think like when you start thinking of your own kids and like and wanting to maybe like start to introduce games to them, like how does your experience play into that? What are your thoughts regarding that?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I haven't been asked that before. So we're off to a great start already, right? Started Belize, now we're here. So I would say that there's a couple things. One is that I am a notoriously poor sport when it comes to any game other than chess. I'm awful. I'm really, really awful. And to the point where I was like, I like walked out on a family yard Scrabble game because people were cheating, right?
Oh, so yeah.
Like, and there were like children there, and I couldn't handle this is like a decade ago, but I just was like, I cannot stay in this situation right now. So, and I think it's because chess is, chess has like very stringent rules. And if anyone is trying to cheat in any way, you raise your hand, the judge comes over, they lose the game. So there's like zero cheating, and there's zero risk or chance in chess. So you never roll a dice and someone just takes a piece off the board. Like the only way you lose a piece is if you made a mistake. And so it's like 100% accountability. The only way you lose in chess is if the other person actually 100% like outwitted you. Right. So, and so that's different than basically every other game. And so on the one hand, it's important to me that my kids learn chess because of how I think what a rich environment it is for the combination of critical and creative thinking skills. In school, you're learning in a lot of cases rote memorization, but you're not having a lot of experiences where you yourself like set a vision for what you want, develop a strategy to try to achieve that, and then get immediate feedback on whether or not your strategy worked, right? That's a very unique learning experience. And so I want them to have that, but I don't want them to have, what I think maybe alienated me at different points throughout my life of like such a hyper competitiveness that you like any given board game, I'll like come up with what I think to be the best possible strategy. But then when that inevitable risk comes in, or that inevitable variability or chance comes in, then, it's tough for me that, okay, I lost, even though I definitely can tell that the luck just went this other person's way. They weren't even thinking that hard about it, right? They weren't trying as hard as I was, but like, it's a luck-based game. And so, so I think the character skills for me is even more important to try to instill in them at an early age, and being okay with losing, because I had to learn that later because in chess it was just such a controlled environment. And so I still want them to learn the sort of critical and creative thinking skills. That there's been a bunch of studies about how chess is so unique in that, but I also want them to learn how, from a very, very early age, from the very beginning, about like losing graciously and winning graciously.
I love that, man. So what I just heard was that like chess is like the figure skating of board games. Like, like it's all on you, man. If you toe pick, it's your fault. You did it, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I have one last question, just because I picked up the game of backgammon about 2 summers ago, and I never. So what are your thoughts on backgammon compared to chess?
I mean, I wouldn't put them in the same, world. I think backgammon's fun, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not the same.
There is some chance. There is some chance because
exactly.
You're rolling
chess is
dice.
The only game I know of where there's like absolutely no element of chance.
Interesting.
So
I never thought of it that way.
I'll add to that though, which is kind of interesting, is when you play Siamese chess or bug house, which is where you have two. I don't know. Are you familiar with bug house?
No. I've never heard of it before.
Super interesting because you end up having it's two players versus two other players. And so if I were playing as black, for example, and you were my partner, you'd be playing as white. And so because I'm playing as black, when I take my opponent's piece, normally I just set it to the side and keep going, right? In Buckhouse, I hand you that piece, which is the same color as your pieces. And so then you have a choice at every turn. You might have 6 or 7 pieces I've given you, and you can think, okay, am I going to move one of the pieces that's already on the board? Or am I going to drop in this piece Brian gave me as a reinforcement onto the board anywhere that I want? So it's like suddenly I have another bishop, just boom, there it is. It's on that square, which adds a whole new layer of collaboration and creativity because it's sort of like alinear, because then suddenly you can go, oh, wait, I'm looking over there and I see that if Brian just had a knight right now, he could get checkmate. I'm just going to sacrifice my queen. Here you go. Checkmate. Game over. Like if one of us wins, we as a team win. Super fun and a kind of a unique, aspect of chess. I think a lot of people aren't as familiar with.
Wait. So there's 2 boards playing at the same time. And when I take my opponent's piece, I can give it to and I'm black and my opponent's white on the other side. I can give them the piece and they get to airdrop it in for as reinforcements.
You give it to your partner. Yeah. So you give it to me. So
across the way, I give it to my partner who's playing. No,
we'd be side by side. So it'd be you and me side by side versus whoever we're playing side by side.
Got it.
Let's assume they work for the airlines,
right.
And they're on the other side. And then if I take their piece, I hand you the piece right next to me, and then you can decide, okay, am I going to drop this piece in that Brian just gave me, or am I just going to move one of my existing pieces? And the same's happening on their side. So suddenly you're not just thinking with the pieces that are on the board, you're also thinking, or sometimes you might be whispering like, hey, just get me a knight, like do whatever you have to do. And then, then it becomes this collaboration and negotiation.
So interesting. And so, so you're like playing 2 board strategies at once.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I like the collaboration side.
It's like the most fertile ground for trash talk anywhere in chess. There's these videos of me as like a 10-year-old just talking absolute. I think it's because I'd seen Searching for Bobby Fischer too many times. But
have you? Yeah. Did you play for money ever? You ever go to the park and play for money?
I did. I did. I'm glad you brought that up. I would go to Potzers in the park that would play for money as a child, right? So they're thinking I'm going to be easy. My dad would come and then we'd say, okay. And I didn't do this regularly, just a couple of times for fun, but where I would ask them how the horsey moved, just to like make sure I knew, right? And just to set expectations, right? And then I would play the game and I would accidentally checkmate them and not say checkmate. I would just move and I'd say check, and then I would just kind of wait and not reveal that obviously I know that it's checkmate, and I'd wait for them. In retrospect, I can't believe I did this, but I'd wait for them to tell me that, oh, you just checkmated me.
Oh, and then you just checkmated? That's amazing.
It's shameful, really. But I would never do that now. But yeah, it was really thrilling for me as a 10 or 11-year-old to do that. And then of course we let the gig up and then say, okay, I don't want your money, and I'm not giving you mine, and we have a laugh and move on. But
that's amazing. Yeah. So I don't know if your titles, are you a master chess or grandmaster? Is that the titles?
I'm not a chess master or grandmaster, actually. So I stopped before I kind of went on the journey there. So I think I got to, it was like 1800 or something in terms of rating. And then when I was 12, I just stopped playing in tournaments. And so my rating was high enough that like when I was 18, I was still in the top 100 in the US for my age group, even though I hadn't played in tournaments for 6 years, which I felt kind of proud of. But yeah, I didn't break the rank of master or grandmaster.
Oh, that's so interesting, man. Well, I appreciate you humoring me, and it's so fun. Oh, yeah. Like when you're like, I've never been asked that question before. I'm like, that's like the norm for this show. I'm like, yeah, because you're here for something else. But I do actually think that like the background always tells more about the why. Why did you get into what you got into? So understanding your what you've done in the past is always helpful to set the table for what you're doing now. So right now, when let's go back to the AI thing. So like, talk to me like I'm a third grader who doesn't play chess, and teach me all about the autonomous AI and the stuff that you're talking about.
Ooh, a third. Yeah, you are coming at me with the hard questions. Okay, a third grader, and you don't know about chess. I don't know why that's relevant, but I'm just
I figure a third grader or a fifth grader that's calling that's bullshitting about the horsey is gonna be like.
Maybe they already know more about AI than I do, and they're
more than likely.
So yeah, so I think if I were explaining to a third grader, which I would say that I would probably start with, usually start with a relevant example and say like, okay, computers can do a lot of things, as you know, and depending on this third grader and how tech savvy they are, probably these days, I don't know if you've seen those gifts going around where it's like my toddler, when I ask them to put their own clothes on, and it's like they're like all thumbs, and then it's like my toddler the moment they touch a tablet and it switches to like Robert Downey Jr. with Jarvis like pulling up and like seeing the whole world. So,
yeah, it's so funny.
But yeah, so let's assume they're tech savvy enough like for that age group. So I'd say like how computers can do a lot of things. Sometimes we have to like go in, like when you want to watch YouTube, for example, and you want to come watch your favorite show with Darius, you have to you have to click through and find the thing that you want to watch, right? Or if Daddy is going to order, if it's assuming my kid, I guess, or if your dad is going to order, or mom is going to order you food or groceries from Uber Eats or from some kind, or maybe something on Amazon. You have to click through multiple times through many screens. That's right now where we're at. If we want something done, we as people can do so many interesting things with computers that we weren't even able to do 30 years ago, right? We would have had to do something, call somebody and ask them, or we would have had to go in person to do whatever that thing was. And so this next phase is we're moving into an era, a new kind of era of what computers can do for us, where those some of those things can now be done. The computer can do without us having to go click through a bunch of screens. So if I wanted to be able to speak to a machine and say, hey, as thinking from a consumer side, although if I'm saying to a third grader, I'd say, if me as a person who wants the same example where I want my favorite pizza from the pizza restaurant, 30 years ago, I'm calling them on my phone, asking them to come bring me pizza. Right now, it's on Uber Eats, and very soon it will be just speaking to a device and saying, "I'd like my favorite pizza from, XYZ pizza place," and it would already have all my information, credit card, address. I don't have to touch any screens. I can just say it, and it confirms, and then I say, "Yep, that sounds good," and it's on its way. And so people, like the things that we can do as people, the surface area of value creation. That's not a third grade thing.
No, it's okay. Forget the third grade.
The amount of amazing things that we can do is expanding. We can do more things. The more that we take these little workflows that we might have where we're doing each step manually and transition that to something that can just be done autonomously or quickly, more quickly, and without us having to go through all those steps ourselves, the more we can turn our focus and our creativity and our attention to new things. Or in the case, if I'm talking to a third grader, hopefully the promise is, the more we can spend time together and making meaningful connections with each other.
So when we start talking about, autonomous transformation, is it that the computer's taking all these micro steps out of the process, whether it's, to your point, I'm ordering Uber Eats or I'm ordering an Uber, I would say, hey, and Siri kind of does this, right? Or Google does some of this stuff now. Alexa does some of this stuff now, sorta. Is what you're saying is, I mean, like, I don't use a lot of those things because I don't like how buggy they are, right?
Yeah, they are.
So, but what when you just said all that, I'm like, well, it sounds like Siri is just going to get smarter. Am I thinking that the right way?
So, that's probably the right interpretation of what I said, but that's because I was trying to condense it down to a third grader. So now I'll zoom out to the fellow adult level and say that basically we've been on this journey from analog to digital. In the last 30 years. And now it's time there's already some that have started to move from digital to autonomous. And so if you think about, for example, if we have people in a developing country where there's been some kind of earthquake, right? And their critical infrastructure is shut down, but there's still people that are in need of critical medications like insulin or things like that, right? In the analog paradigm, we're going to try to load stuff up onto a plane, fly out, see if there's somewhere we can try to land and then drive over and get to them, right? Digital paradigm that we've gotten to in the last, 5 years, really even, is, okay, we can get those materials close to them, and then load them up onto drones and use drones to fly over into that neighboring village, let's say, and then still reach them. And I think the autonomous paradigm would be, okay, so the moment that disaster happens, we're able to, at the push of a button, have systems that self-load themselves, make microtransactions with various transportation, like planes, trains, and automobiles, to get to where they're close enough that now they can fly over there themselves with no human in the loop whatsoever. It's just autonomously happening for us, and it's getting that medication to where it needs to go without really the risk of humans in the loop in a way. And they can even decide at some point if they need to land and charge, because based on the distance, they can find local charging stations, make microtransactions, and pay for the charging that they're getting directly without any humans in the loop, and then be able to go the rest of the way. So that's like just one example of. Another would be that, if for example, if you imagine that each one of us has an agent, so to speak, that's on our behalf, like Jarvis, that's the most relatable example for most people, that's going out and making purchases for us. Well, if you have a newborn and you need baby wipes, let's say, if I'm going on the website to try to look at baby wipes, there's imagery, there's emotional appeal. If I'm telling an agent, hey, I need baby wipes for my baby, the only thing that matters to in that paradigm is price to value. It doesn't matter. Marketing doesn't matter to me or to my machine when I'm asking it to get me baby wipes, because it's really about how quickly can it get there, how much are we paying, and how much value, is this good quality or not? And so it then can negotiate with either multiple retailers or directly with the people that could even go straight to the actual producers, theoretically, right? Where it might shake up a little bit of the future of retail. And then a lifetime value sort of transforms a little bit, because before it's like, well, you might not have captured my business on this Amazon site, but when I go to Safeway, you paid extra to have Huggies right there, so I'm gonna pick up Huggies. But if it's an autonomous agent, it's just going to be delivered to my address for the next 5 years until I'm done with baby wipes. Capturing my business in that first critical moment with the price to value could mean 5 years of subscription-like business that's just baked in. And so I think the paradigms of how we kind of do business and operate, and then the promise in the workforce, is that there's a whole swath of things that we do today that are really transactional, that that could be could be made autonomous. And to me, that's exciting, because that means that we as people can do more interesting and exciting work.
So let me ask you a question, because what I heard you just say, interestingly enough, was kind of where you landed, which is that you start to eliminate some of if you're eliminating the human error of retail, right? Because I think there's preferences, right? Using the human, the transaction of a retail transaction, right? Or the act of a retail transaction. There's a fair amount of inefficiency involved in that. If Darius is on one end of the buying and you're selling me Quest bars, I'm probably shopping. I'm looking at on Amazon, for instance, and there's some arbitrage there. Some Quest bars are $32.95 for a box, and I'll just look till I find them for $28.95, because I know that that's typically what they'll sell for. But some people are trying to arb them up a little bit. So when I heard you say all the things I just heard you say, it sounds to me like there will be autonomous behavior from the machine learning that will essentially eliminate a lot of intermediaries and middle people in the process, because it's going to be deflationary in nature. It's going to squeeze out any excess margin, because the computer is going to it's going to say, Darius, what do you want? Best quality, best price, speed of delivery, right? Those are the three things I'm going to care about. Now, your preferences, Brian, might be slightly different. You might say speed supersedes price and quality, because I need, I'm bleeding out and I need a freaking Band-Aid. And if I can get one 5 minutes earlier, it's better, right? So so when I see that, my first question is, how do you think do you think that there's going to be individual preferences that over time the machine learning will actually, or the autonomous, AI will learn my preferences? And then B, I'm assuming the answer is yes. But B is, how will this affect intermediaries? How will this affect, the inefficiencies in the market? Because when I hear all this, I'm like, oh, that's not good for folks that have commoditized products. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. I think that I think that it'll affect in terms of, to your point about how much it would learn about our individual preferences. I think that it would absolutely, like, for instance, if I said, hey, anytime I think some of it would be individual preferences and some of it would just be logical based off of like aggregating learning across people. So for example, if I'm, in general, if somebody asks for a specific type of, let's say, cologne, right? Like if I'm saying, hey, I want Spice Bomb and I want it at a good price. And it says, well, there could be a voice, sort of interface back to me of, well, there's this option that's, going to take you a month to get here. But it's, $20 less expensive than this other option that can be here tomorrow. Do you have a preference? And then, so it can still push that back. And then I think that probably if you think about like trying to reduce having so many microtransactions that you're basically getting things shipped from all over the way that we kind of are now, if we move into a space where it's like, okay, if there's predictability that I need, that I've now subscribed, that I'm needing these core essentials delivered to my house every week, let's say, almost the way that like milk and other things used to be, right? Then when I go to add something, it can optimize and say, okay, for $2 more, it would be a part of this like thing that's already coming, this, load that's already coming. And so, and that reduces either the shipping cost or the effect on the environment from the logistics. And then I can make that choice, right? And so in terms of that, I hope that answers the first part of your question. But the second part, in terms of like what it could mean for businesses and intermediaries, I don't want to just, like make a bold statement and say like, oh, this is exactly what it'll mean. I think that it will naturally introduce a shift that I think that, like, for instance, for me, there's some things that I want to go buy that when I go find it, it says you can only buy this on Amazon. And it's like, oh, okay. So either Amazon or maybe eBay if I'm buying it from like or Facebook Marketplace or something. And so, but I can imagine there's certain things that I would love to just buy directly from, whatever like for me, I wear a lot of Ralph Lauren and I would love to buy directly from them where possible. So if I were like, hey, this exact shirt that is already a part of my wardrobe, that maybe I've already scanned my wardrobe into this thing, for all we know, like there's so many different types of use cases for something like this. I want that exact sweater again. And it could be like, okay, well, you can get it brand new from these 3 places for these prices in this timing. And I can say, okay, I'd like that one. And it's the same, I already know what it is. It's, a discrete quantity and quality. And so I think that, I guess there is a potential that it could mean some disruption and in terms of the intermediary kind of market. But then I think what it would mean is that they would need to reinvent the unique and value that in the case of Amazon, it could be, well, we buy all this stuff and aggregate it, and we have this amazing logistics network. And so we're getting it to you much cheaper from a shipping perspective. And we're willing to eat some of the cost differential that of the fact that we would have liked to upcharge you on the Ralph Lauren sweater, but we're willing to not upcharge you if that means that we're bundling it in with this other stuff that you're already getting. So I think that the market will naturally adjust and it'll be interesting to see, but I think it'll open up new opportunities as well. What I'm hopeful for is that it means that we as consumers can have a little bit more control and that the price to value equation becomes more central, because if we're not scrolling through web sort of 2.0 or 1.2 or even 3.0 in a way, we're not scrolling through all these images to try to filter to find the exact thing. If instead we're able to just describe what we want and be able to be shown, here's 2 options that are similar to what you want, that are in the price range you're looking for, the amount of time that can be saved, and the fact that marketing can become like so much more personal, like truly hyper personalized, where it's like, one small bit of content coming from Nordstrom's agent to my little screen that I'm looking at and going, yeah, that looks great. I'd love to buy that. And I'm done. I didn't just scroll through a whole big website. I literally had a conversation, saw one thing, confirmed, yeah, I like that. So I think that's some of the promise of what could come.
What do you think when you look at like in professional services industries and how this might affect them? So I know that in like law, for instance, we were talking earlier about my friend Jeff Shocks, former guest on the show. He does IP attorney. He's an IP attorney, venture capitalist, especially in the autonomous vehicle space. But he's talked about that AI is going to disrupt law, because there's a lot of law is like just looking at a lot of information and then putting it together in a format that is like pretty, there's not a lot of art to it, right? It's very like kind of like rules driven. And so when you look at that, or you look at wealth management, or you look at mortgage. I come from the mortgage world, where man, that's just like a process. Like, hey, go get me a mortgage, and Rocket Mortgage, or formerly Quicken Mortgage, had like a Super Bowl ad a few years back that said "Press button, get loan." Right. So when you start thinking about aggregation of data on blockchain, where it's in a controlled environment, where you can't, where for instance, like chains of title, or banking information, or my income, or all the things that like we do have in disparate databases right now, right? And let's assume blockchain does what it's promised to do, which is like put those on a ledger that is safe and complete, and kind of becomes, I guess, like something that can't be altered, right, without with some validity to it, right? If we have that, and now you layer on top of what you're talking about, which is this autonomous transformation through AI, what is your thoughts around how that's going to affect those professional service businesses? Because I think there's a use case for it in a lot of the financial services world that I just mentioned, but you could look at it from real estate, you could look at it from appraisals of homes, you could look at it from a lot of the accounting, again, all stuff that like, if you're pulling it all from, there's a rule set, it's done the same way every time. You can pull it from these, like these databases that are fortified. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story, Darius. I'm going to start with a story. So there's this amazing story from the late 1800s where a man named Jacques Jacquard came up with the weaving. You might know this story, but he came up with like an automated loom. And at the time, there were these weavers, and then master weavers, they were called, and apprentices that made clothing. And they felt threatened. They were like, this is going to take all of our jobs. So they in Lyon, France, they went out, and there were like 5 of these looms that had been made. They were able to successfully burn down 3 of them. They're like 2-story looms, these like giant machines. And then they were trying to find Jacques Jacquard to kill him was their goal. They broke into his house, and they were like very serious about this. So this is going to take our livelihoods away. And of course now we have the benefit of knowing, hundreds of years later, that what it did is it just meant that people that couldn't afford to pay for the master weavers and their apprentices to make, really nice handmade clothes for them, who had before been living in like rags or things like that, suddenly could afford actually like decent, really nice clothing that had actually had patterns in them and such. And there to this day, there's still a premium on handmade goods. And travel agencies is another great example. There's travel agencies right now that exist that serve the wealthy in California, that are, celebrities, where they say, oh, I don't want to be clicking through Expedia and going through and booking my flight and choosing what time, and then trying to go book a private car. And then, all these steps that you would have to do if you're, I guess an average, middle class or lower class, individual. Instead, being able to say, I want to go to Belize. Please take care of everything for me. Right. And then there are people now that were travel agents 30 years ago that you had to come to their corner office, and see the pictures of all the places you could go in their little scrapbooks. Right. Obviously, that's not what they're doing anymore. Now they're taking in calls and they're a front end service where you're interacting with a human, and they handle everything else with digital tools really efficiently, so they can serve a lot of different clients. So I think the same thing's going to happen in law. There are so many underserved people when it comes to law, when it comes to finance, when it comes to wealth management, that have no access to information, that have no access to resources, little to no access. And so the fact that now these systems means that it can actually help them. Even just think about filing your taxes with TurboTax. There's a lot of people that would have, it would have been it's a lot harder to file taxes without a platform like that. And so I think that that's going to be the first shakeup that we're going to see. And then the people that are currently maybe helping the middle class in a certain way with a certain type of service in these areas are going to see that, okay, now Now I'm going to sort of reinvent and upskill and up level the offering and the service that I have. And it's going to be something that maybe is a more premium service, but it's still that my expertise as a legal in the legal profession, or it could be in in finance or wealth management, is still desperately needed. It's just I'm recasting that same expertise into a different application, so that I can continue adding value, because maybe the way that expertise was I was getting paid for the application of that expertise, maybe now isn't needed anymore, but that expertise is still needed.
Interesting. So when you start thinking about, we had a guest on the show, Jeff Booth, who wrote a book that was kind of a dysphoric book around, I think I might have just made that word up. But
I know what you meant.
Dystopic, dystopic. Yeah, dystopia. Yeah. Sorry, I made that. I totally. Guess sorry, audience. I just made a word up. So we'll put that in.
I think it could be a word. Why not? Dysphoric. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, it sounded good. Yeah. I'm like screw
opposite of euphoric. I feel like it. I mean, now I feel like I need to look it up.
Yeah. Let's see if that's a word. I'm going to look this up really quickly just so I can see if I'm smarter than I thought I would. Yeah, like dysphoric. Let's see, dysphoric. Dysphoria. Dysphoria is it is the adolescent state of unease and generalized dissatisfaction with life. It's a kind of right. It's all right. It's synonym for what I was trying to say. So dystopic. He is a dystopic book. It's like the future. Let me pull up Jeff's book, because what he was talking about essentially was that basically that humans don't have like a good capacity to understand exponential math, exponential numbers. And when you start to think of Moore's law, right, you have that, the speed of microchips double every 18 months or whatever. And that we're hitting this exponential effect of that now because of the previous, iterations of increases of speed. And some of this is what we're talking about right now regarding generative AI, and it's fast enough now where it can do the things that people need to do. And what's that going to look like 18 months from now, and then 18 months from even then, as you start to apply Moore's law. And one of the things he said was, he asked me a question. He said, "Hey, Darius, if I folded a piece of paper like 50 times, like how tall would that paper?" I don't know if have you heard this like analogy or whatever. Yeah. But basically, that the last fold you're like is like the thickness from here to the sun, right? That's like because of the power of exponential numbers. And so his point was that when we go for that 30-second fold, when we're at the 30-second fold, but by the time we're at our 40th fold, it's like things are going to be so fast that some of the things we're talking about will just like, you'll just say it, and so it's just going to happen without you even like asking. Right. It'll already be happening because it'll know your preferences and understand. It'll read all the information. It'll have the knowledge set to go and do your taxes. It'll file them. It'll go through the blockchain. The blockchain will talk to you and it'll check it and say it's good. And like all these things are just kind of happening automatically. And we live in this world where like the whole world just happens for us. That can be done better than humans doing it. And his perspective is like, this is super, 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 what's the word I'm looking for? The opposite of inflation, deflationary. And that you basically destroy the financial systems when this happens. This is his perspective, right? And that all the financial, so again, this is dystopic, right? Financial systems get destroyed. But you live in a world of massive abundance now, because things aren't expensive because the computers just do it all for almost nothing, right? So I wanted to kind of bounce it off, because I remember when I interviewed him, I was like, dude, I was like kind of sick to my stomach afterwards. Yeah. I was like,
of course.
That doesn't sound. I'm like, it's pretty logical what you're saying. If we think of Moore's law and the power of exponential numbers, and we have AI getting smarter and smarter, like everything you just said, I'm like, I could imagine a world where that exists. Like I was born in 1978. Like I remember like being the only person in my house that could turn on the VCR. Right. So like to go from that to where we're at today is like, dude, we're in a different world, right? So I can't even imagine
today.
Say that again.
I said from Prince of Persia to where we are today.
Yeah, right? Exactly, right? So like,
I don't know if you ever played that one, but that the graphics are 2-bit and like
totally. No, I grew up playing freaking Jungle Hunt in Atari, which is like even worse than what you're talking about, right? So I'm Gen X, so I'm like the first analog digital generation, right? Internet was coming out when I was in high school, so I'm bilingual. But so when people start talking about stuff, I get it. Yeah, I understand it because I've lived in both worlds. So when you hear stuff like that, given the work you're doing and what you understand, what are your thoughts? Like, how do you feel about the things I just said?
So the first thing I would say is the first thing that comes to mind when you describe what you just described is the slippery slope fallacy, which is that if we take a step in any single direction, we can naturally and logically assume all the rest of the steps, and we can assume them happening super fast. And so I think it's something that a lot of really smart people with a great deal of creativity are currently kind of falling prey to. Another one is, I think, appeal to authority, another fallacy, which is that we look at and we hear, like, for instance, Stephen Hawking, there's this famous interview, you may have seen it on the BBC, where he, before he passed away, where he said, there was a voice machine that helped him to speak. And they said, they asked him about it. It was AI powered. And they said, what do you think about that? And what do you think about AI in general? And he said, well, AI in general has been really helpful. But if we ever were able to get to a point where AI actually was full AI, was sentient, so to speak, it would outpace human evolution because it could replicate itself and all this other stuff. So he's, pontificating, kind of applying a slippery slope fallacy in and of itself there. And then, the next day, the articles that came out were like, Stephen Hawking says it's the end of the world and AI is taking over, and like all these things where, it's great for clicks, right? But when that's not what he said, but two, it's an appeal to authority fallacy, because he was a world leading authority on astrophysics, not on AI. That wasn't his discipline or his field. And so I think we have a lot of times where now AI is the topic of modern discourse. So a lot of really smart people are going, well, if we assume this is true and we kind of follow the logical path, then we end up in this scary place. One of the things that I would say that, that to sort of balance the perspective that you said, is that the AI has never taken anyone's job. And by that, I mean, AI doesn't do things. It doesn't walk up to a factory and say, give me these people's jobs. Leaders at companies say, I'm going to try to leverage this technology to automate these tasks so I can cut costs and maybe lay these people off or repurpose put them into different jobs within our organization. But the AI isn't the thing doing that. It's a leader making that choice. They're using AI as a tool. And the same, I would say, if you think about value creation, AI isn't going to just go start spinning up a business. It's not embodied, right? So it's not going to spin up a business that creates that puts humans out of business. And then it's easy in a science fiction mind that we all kind of, especially those of us that have grown up, in this sort of era, right, to maybe think through how that could all happen. But if you think about more from the practical side, I would say, grounded in kind of the reality that we're in, is that there are, if you look at any manufacturer, for example, there are people that are in charge of every plant, and so they're going to be making decisions about when, where, how to responsibly apply these technologies for creating goods. And I think that the same is true of from a legal perspective, or from the way that we experience even entertainment. I think that there's people in charge of sort of we hold the accountability as leaders of what the shape the world should take. And that's one thing I wrote about in the book, and why I talked about it, the tagline, creating a more human future in the era of AI, because we have a choice. I would say we kind of failed this last round, where all these technologies came and we let it sort of just be an amoeba and grow however it was going to grow. And I think there's been a lot of social harm. And so I think now that we're on the precipice of another huge era of change, I think we have an opportunity that leaders can say, okay, and how can I do this purposefully? How can I design? What are those rituals that make us feel human? If looking at screens is draining us and we're more depressed than ever, what are ways that we can continue to create the value that we're creating, but diminishing the amount of time that we're spending on screens? Or if being disconnected through remote work is, I'm not trying to make a comment on remote work, because that's a whole other topic that I do have thoughts on, but I don't think it's the topic of today. But the decisions that we make about what it means to be collaborating with other humans around the world is something we still get to decide as people. And then how we're going to employ those tools, AI being a tool, is a choice that we get to make. It's not going to make it for us. And so if you're wondering how's AI going to look this way? Well, let's look at the leaders that are, it's like if I said, well, these hammers are so amazing, and you can make anything with a hammer. And before you know it, a hammer is going to make a new kind of house that's inhospitable to humans. And you think, well, actually, no, because look at the builders, look at the architects, look at who are the people that are designing and building that house. And our world being the leaders of our organizations and our political and economic systems are the architects and the builders that are deciding what our day-to-day experience is like, either purposefully or without thinking about that. And so to me, I look more to that and I say, okay, how can I partner with those leaders? How can we equip those leaders with the best decision criteria to be able to make choices that are going to make our world more human, make our experience, help us to thrive, as opposed to, just chasing the bottom line at the expense of our experiences as people.
I appreciate that a lot. Let's talk about the book. I know we're getting towards the end of the show, and so I want to educate the audience. I mean, first of all, Brian, I appreciate all your insights. I think I told you earlier on the show that I'm just selfish and just invite people to the show so I can learn from them. So I'm like, so you've watched firsthand, as we talked about, police and chess and God knows what else, and all my conspiracy theories around AI. So moving to the book though, so autonomous transformation, creating a more human future in the era of AI. Tell us, just kind of give us the elevator pitch. Who's the book for?
Sure.
I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the book is for people that want to harness the economic and societal potential of the potential that technology presents. And I think that, we're on this era of, precipice of this era of change. And yet 87% of AI initiatives fail. Like investments in AI, 87% fail. Gartner just released another report, 85% fail. So we haven't made much progress. And if you even account for that, I think that's in the standard deviation, that 2%. But so the book is for people that want to not fail, I guess, is the lack of a better phrase. I've been on the front lines of AI transformation with Fortune 500 companies for a while now, and learned a lot about what wasn't working and what was, and researched deeper to determine what would some frameworks and methodologies and processes that could be actually put into a PowerPoint or put into an Excel file you could actually go do something with, as opposed to just pontificating about all the change that could come. There's a little pontification in there, and there's historical context and stuff like that. But the punchline is, now go do this, because this is a way that you can. And one of them is future solving for the future instead of just solving the problems that are in front of us. Another is that I think we need to move from being data driven to being reason driven, where we're accounting for our human discipline of reason and logic as much as we account for data. And it's something we've gotten lost in. We've become unscientific in our decision making, and it's holding us back. And another one, just one last example, is we're divided by our expertise. So we have business experts, industry experts, and technology experts in every company. Sometimes you have leaders that straddle, two or more of those, but they're often spending a lot of their energy and creative and political, abilities focused on trying to vie for purchasing power within, inward, as opposed to outward toward the market and toward creating value. And so some practical frameworks for how leaders, from what I've, seen as well as researched on how leaders can better work together to turn what I call being divided by those experts, divided by our expertise, to being multiplied by our expertise. So there's just 3 examples from the book of the types of sort of frameworks and such that I've tried to put together and put out there in the world to help folks sort of lead this era of AI, as opposed to be swept up in it.
And so when you start thinking about the ideal avatar, who you wrote the book for, is it leaders? Is it of executives of big companies, small companies, everything in the middle? Kind of give us a little bit on that. Who should want to read this book?
I mean, I think everybody in a way should find something interesting or valuable about it. I'd say that the target in terms of who I had in mind when I was writing it was probably any size of company, but folks that have, responsibility to, or accountability to, to leverage technology and what they do, not necessarily just in the technical side, but business units. And, those are, especially when I was in consulting, a lot of my clients were in the business unit side, right? Or in the domain, the industry side. And so across all, I guess, functions of an organization at large or small. And then I did make sure I peppered in some things that would make it, hopefully interesting for even, I think even in the beginning of the book, the front matter, I said, like, if you pick this up because you have a loved one that works in tech and you just kind of want to know what's coming, this book is for you too.
Love that, man. So anyone that wants to connect with you, get the book, where are places, what's the best places for them to be in the know of all things Brian Evergreen as well as the book?
So all things Brian Evergreen, you can go to LinkedIn. I'm on there. That's the main social media platform I spend time on. So connect with me there. And I also, you can go to brianevergreen.com if you want to, reach out directly. And then in terms of the book, there's, it's on all major retailers.
Cool. So we're going to go to the Greatness Machine. Just a question. Listen, audience members, you don't want the big bad AI wolf to come blow your house down. So you got to listen to Brian's. Is it audiobook too, or just written?
Yeah, it's audiobook as well.
Did you narrate it?
I wanted to, but I by the time that I found out that they'd already contracted with somebody else. So yeah,
I biffed up on that too. I wrote a book called The Core Value Equation, which is how do you operationalize values in a company. And it was before I did the show. And so I was like, oh, and I didn't like audiobooks then, but I like them a lot now. And so I was like, oh, I don't want to screw this up. And so I hired like a Juilliard trained actor through like one of those companies to do it. And then now I'm like, oh, I fucked that up, man. The people want to hear me talk my bullshit. So anyway, next, I might reread it. So cool. So I can get it on Audible, or I can get it on one of the audio platforms.
That's right.
Very cool.
Audible or Barnes and Nobles. And then, and it's an ebook and, hardcover.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to listening to your book. I'll throw that on the list tonight. Guys, go out there, support Brian, support his book. We're going to go to the greatness question in just a second. You can hook up with him. We'll put all this stuff in the show notes, by the way. So if you're ever in like the apps that sometimes you guys do this in Apple, or if you're doing it on Spotify, click into the show notes, because my team actually, I don't have AI, by the way, writing these, which they do write show notes now, just so we're clear. And my team actually does it by hand, the old fashioned way. So we have handwritten show notes, no generative AI in there, no chat GPT. You know what's funny is my team sometimes will do chat GPT. I know you guys are listening to this, by the way. And I'll be like, hey guys, put chat GPT in the show notes. Come on, it's so obvious. So I'm like an old school teacher. I'm like, do it the old way, do it the hard way. I want you using your brains. It's a tool, as Brian says. It's not you, it's the tool.
You're kind of making my point for me, Darius.
Yeah. I can read ChatGPT from a mile away.
Handwritten.
That's so funny. So my brother, who's my business partner, we started this private equity business, and he's like, he sends out like kind of solicitation emails to people. And our business partner is like, he was like, my brother's like, just like he's not, he has kind of like dyslexic and shit. So it's, he's not the best at like, grammar and shit like that, because it's just he's just it's like write shit backwards in his head. And so he's like sending emails through ChatGPT. My business partner is like, man, your brother's really like, he has a South Zimbabwe accent. He's like, man, your brother, like, he's very proper in his emails. It's like, dear sir. And they're like, and I'm like, yeah, that's ChatGPT. So it's not sentient enough yet. It doesn't talk with slang. So let's do this. I'd love to get the greatness question, and then we'll get you out of here. I know it's late on a Friday, at least where I'm at it is. So you ready for the greatness question, Brian?
I'm ready.
All right.
Hit me.
All right, what is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
So I think the number one barrier to creating greatness that I've run into in my life has been the ability to learn something I didn't think I could learn before. And so when I first decided that I was going to learn to write code, I remember looking at the screen. I'd signed up for some Coursera or Codecademy or something course. I remember looking at the screen and literally thinking, I can't learn this. My brain it was like my brain was automatically shutting off, and I'd have to like look back at the screen, and it was like all just blurring together for me. And I remember thinking, okay, wait, but I had the privilege of having met so many people that were, working full time as senior software engineers and software architects and all that kind of stuff. It's like, I've met those people. They're not just like, gods that walk among, they're regular people that have learned how to do this. I can learn how to do this too. And I'd say in terms of how I overcame that was just continuing to push through my own sort of blocking myself, I guess, for about lack of a better phrase. And I did that with learning to write code. I did that with learning, data science. And then I did that with learning to talk to C-level executives, right? And like continuing at each stage of my career of like this natural feeling of like, I don't know how to go do that thing, and saying, well, but they're, look at they're all just people. Like when back in my music background, like I studied abroad in Germany and I went to, and I saw Chopin's grave in Paris, for example. And it's like, he was just a human, like all these people that we almost deify, right? They were just people. And so I think being able to, at every step of my career, when I want to do something or learn something, pushing through the natural inhibition of feeling like, well, who am I to learn that? Or that's going to take way too long to learn, and saying, well, I'm just going to push through that and I'm going to do it anyway. I think has served me greatly in doing all the things that I've done.
I love that.
Same with writing the book.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I was saying that if one person could do it, I can do it. So, but except maybe play basketball against LeBron James, or like fight.
You could do it.
I could do it. I would get crushed. Hey, I have one question before I let you go. One last question. Normally we end on the greatness question, but I have one more question for you. So anyone that's watching this, if you're not watching this, if you're listening to this, you can imagine what I'm about to say. But if you're watching this, you can see what I'm talking about. It's behind you over your right shoulder. Are those encyclopedias?
Right there?
Yeah.
No, these are all right. I'm so glad you asked. This is the Harvard 5-foot shelf. In the early 1900s, there was this gentleman that said, you can fit all the classics of what you would need to learn into a 5-foot shelf. And so they created this, bundle of these books, and they've got everything from, they're the classics, right? You've got Socrates, but also like Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, or poems by Burns, and essays of Emerson and things like that. And they fit into a 5-foot shelf. So there's 51 editions inside of it. And you can't buy them anymore unless you go on eBay and you buy a set. So you got to go on eBay and find sets that are hopefully complete and that are colorway that you like. And so I was able to find this one, and I love it.
That's incredible. So last question, have you read the whole 5-foot shelf?
So my brother-in-law and we were going to buy them together and then read them together. And then I bought them. I don't know that he has yet, last time I checked. And then we both had kids. And so someday, maybe over coffee and coffee and bourbon, depending on the time of day, we'll get through it.
I love it, man. Brian, appreciate you so much for coming on the show, dropping some knowledge, and putting up with my shenanigans on this Friday afternoon. Appreciate you, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Darius. It's been fun.
Yeah, likewise. Guys, listen, go get the book. I'm going to get it, and I'm going to go get the Harvard 5-foot shelf while I'm at it. And if you happen to see our boy Josh, the former Bobby Fischer, just throw eggs out his ass. With that said, so much gratitude from us here at the Greatness Machine. Brian, thank you for coming on the show today. Peace out, everybody. Love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
my lover.